The Fantasy Alarm Fantasy Football Podcast with host Howard Bender and John Impemba.
What is going on, everybody? John Impemba here with Howard Bender. Welcome into the Quick Out Fantasy Football Show here. Howard Bender filling in for Andrew Cooper, who's on dad duty. Bender, Coop this week, little surprise for him, little like mini vacation sort of. Really handles being a new dad. So I got you with me here talking a little running back ADP today, man.
Dude, literally every person in the world who has kids just said, up yours, Impemba. What are you talking about? Little vacation here. No. Listen, he's got the tight end article series. That's been coming out over at fantasyalarm.com. Been staying in touch with things that I hardly think having a newborn, whether the wife's still in recovery from the C-section or whatnot. There's no way.
Aren't they just sleeping and eating at this point? Like, I don't even know. That's I don't know what they're doing. I know Coop, like you said, is still working though. He's got his latest Titan Fades article out right now. You can go check that out. I see him in the Reddit streets as well, defending his honor as those heathens out there are going after him with some of his hot, spicy takes in there. So check out the Fantasy Football Draft Guide. It's live. You see the QR code there on the screen as you're with Howard and myself here. It comes free with an all-pro subscription that also includes a 7-day free trial. So go check all that out over at Fantasy Alarm. Become a member of the family today. Get access to everything we do on site, not just fantasy football content, but if you're in MLB, NBA, NHL, MMA, PGA, you name it, we cover it. It's all included in the all-pro subscription. The NFL DFS season is right around the corner. A couple of years ago, we made a guy $1 million. Millionaire Mike bought himself a boat, won a single entry bullet there on the FanDuel Millie contest. So a lot of exciting things going on here at Fantasy Alarm, including that draft guide being out. We have the player debate series coming up. That was huge last year. A lot of you guys enjoyed that. We'll have that coming out later this week and into the rest of the next weeks coming up. And of course, we have our premium Discord offering as well. You get myself, Howard Bender, Andrew Cooper, Dan Servadidio, Justin Reel, and James Grandi. The whole team is in there. Colby Conway answering your fantasy football questions, getting you ready to dominate your draft. So don't waste any time. Go join the Fantasy Alarm family today, Bender, and win with us, right?
Seriously, and here's the thing, why do you want to hit me up on Twitter for answers to your draft strategy questions? All right, the rest of your league mates can see all that. They see who you're asking, how you're asking, why you're asking, and you don't want to let them in on it. Join the family. Hang out in Discord. I'm all over Discord. John's all over Discord. Coop's in there. Dan Malin, James Grande. I mean, you're going to get some rock solid work from everybody there. So yes, that is that's just, it's an absolute must. An absolute must.
Yeah.
I mean, unless you like losing.
I was going to say, unless you're not into strategy articles, player profiles, player breakdown, sleepers, busts, rookies, projections, all that good stuff. If you're not into that, then that's fine. It's a living draft guide, which is great as well. You want to go to your local convenience store and pick up a draft guide. They're telling you that DeAndre Hopkins is still in the Cardinals. They're telling you that Dalvin Cook is still on the Minnesota Vikings. How are you supposed to evaluate your analysis with a data draft guide? We have the living draft guide. It gets updated as news breaks. Kenneth Walker and Zach Charbonnet go down. Your magazine says that they're projected for 1,000 yards. You should be taking them in the third round. We have the updated information. We're here. The cheat sheets out, like Bender said, getting you ready to get you going there with the draft grid, the auction values, and all the rankings over there. So a lot of good stuff in the draft guide, Howard. But we're here to talk some running back ADPs today. How do you feel about that?
Listen, the running back position right now is easily the most polarizing position in football because you've got the stuff that's going on right now, contracts, upset running backs, the Jim, Irsay versus Jonathan Taylor situation. I mean, there's a lot going on. You also have a very pass happy NFL. So when you look at most fantasy football drafts, and we've got a couple of mock drafts already over at fantasyalarm.com that you can check out. But with everybody being so heavily into the wide receivers, and we're seeing so many wide receivers just in those first 3 rounds in comparison to what we've seen in years past, I think it's very important to pay attention to the running backs, and figure out where you are going to take them. Where is that best value?
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. And that's been the biggest theme, I think, as we've, broken down the ADPs here, whether it be in best ball, dynasty, or now as we're working our way into redraft, is that the shift in ideology, we're so used to these first rounds, 8, 9 running backs being taken, and people are forced almost to go RB heavy. And it led to the zero RB strategy because people were just waiting on all these running backs to come down the board. You knew the injuries were happening. But now there's such a heavy push on these wide receivers. All of these running backs are dropping back multiple rounds from where you would typically expect them to see. And now it's forcing maybe a different change in strategy and how you're approaching your draft, obviously depending the league format. Before we get into breaking down the RDPs here, I want to at least talk about some of the top stories of the running back position, and at least over the last couple of weeks, and get your thoughts there relevant to the RB position. The Jonathan Taylor drama, right? He's requested a trade. He's holding out. What's your thoughts on this situation? Do we think this gets cleaned up anytime soon? Do the Colts part with him? What are your thoughts here?
I think it has to be resolved. I mean, I really do. And whether, it's a possible trade or whatever, the thing about it is, and I've said this, on a couple of shows right now, yes, Jim Irsay is handling this like an ass. I mean, he really is. But for the same token, running backs, for lack of a better way to say it, are whining like a bunch of bitches. Right. Because, it's like, listen, this is what the CBA is set. And, the NFLPA, DeMaurice Smith in particular, this is the deal that was negotiated back in 2011 when the owners had an opt-out for the current CBA, which I thought was absolutely ridiculous, in my opinion. But nevertheless, the Players Association got what they asked for. There was a rookie salary cap put on there, which is now part of the big problem.
Right.
50 what was it? It was like $50 million was pulled out of whatever the funding is, and that's put towards medical research. And then $1 billion was put towards the NFLPA retirement fund. So this is what they asked for. And again, I've said this, before as well. Ownership is playing chess. The NFLPA is playing checkers, because the ownership is sitting there looking at what the economic climate's going to be in 15 to 20 years, because football's not going away. The players, they're in a more short-sighted fashion because they want their money. They want to buy their house. They want to get theirs right now. They understand that there's a short shelf life for players. And so everybody's like, me, 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 me. They're not being, I guess, trendsetters. Like, what you need is somebody who stands up for all of the running backs out there. You need the Norma Ray, right? And she's going to, be, and, she's a big union rep and take down big business and stuff like that, and sacrifice her current needs. And you don't have running backs who do that. So right. Jonathan Taylor, like Josh Jacobs, like Saquon Barkley, they have no leverage whatsoever. New CBA is not going to be ratified or voted on even until 2030. So right. The owners really don't have any incentive to make any kind of adjustments. Could they play ball and say, all right, this is something that we do need to correct and we want to keep everybody happy? Yes, absolutely. But they are not going to do it while running backs are bad-mouthing everybody, while running backs are playing the social media game. Oh, I'm going to take my team off of my social media follows right now because I'm all pissed off. If you want to try it in the court of public opinion, well, running backs, you're just going to piss off ownership even more. So I think eventually it does get resolved. Jonathan Taylor's too good of a player. I'm buying the dip.
Yeah, I mean, that's what we're seeing right now, too, in drafts early on, just a small decrease in where he is going because of the uncertainty. And that's where you go ahead and take advantage of some of that wariness that fantasy managers may have who have drafts right now. Thoughts on the guys that are still available, though? Dalvin Cook hasn't signed anywhere. Ezekiel Elliott hasn't signed anywhere. Leonard Fournette hasn't signed anywhere. Kareem Hunt hasn't even visited anywhere that's been reported. What are your thoughts on those guys that are available? Which ones do you think sign first?
Well, I think Dalvin Cook right now is just playing the bidding war game. I'm going to talk to the Jets. I'm going to talk to the Patriots. I'm going to talk to Miami. Miami hasn't upped their offer yet. And then Miami came out yesterday. They're like, well, we're looking at Dalvin Cook, but if we get him, it's more of a luxury signing than anything else. Like all of a sudden now the Dolphins, who have put the contract in his hands, are now trying to play coy. And Dalvin Cook is just trying to drive the price up. He's going to one of those three teams. I still feel like he wants to be in Miami. My heart as a Jets fan says give him to New York, and let's bring Breece Hall along slowly. But that's Cook will sign somewhere. Jacobs is not going to walk away from 10.1 million. He's just not going to do it. So I think he signs, and then once that happens, then I think the rest of the dominoes fall. Ezekiel Elliott, we know that he's been looked at by the Chargers. We know that he's been looked at by the Cowboys as well. To come back and do that. And same thing with Fournette. So Hunt, forget it. I think he's done. Right?
What happened to him?
There's something more behind the scenes, because if you're not getting a single visit,
right,
then there's something wrong there. And I mean, listen, you saw him last year, right? I mean, granted, you're playing with Nick Chubb, and Nick Chubb is arguably the best running back in the NFL. Not even arguably, he just is. Right. And so Hunt kind of got, completely phased out of things in Cleveland. And then they were like, screw it, let him walk. So I think there's something there with Hunt that, we're not hearing or seeing.
That's what I think. Yeah.
Yeah. So
he could have had some offseason surgery nobody's reporting on. He's just like not ready to go, or there is some personal reason that, again, we're not even getting reports that he's been in on visits, which, seems wild to me. Last, I think, notable thing here, Alvin Kamara meeting with Roger Goodell. He pled down to the misdemeanor from the felony. What's your expectations for him in terms of possible suspension? And, are you still willing to draft him knowing he could miss games before knowing what he'll miss? Or are you waiting to find out what he'll miss before you dive in?
I feel like we're in the 4 to 6 game range for suspension. I feel like that's kind of where we are, pleading down the misdemeanor, but the video doesn't lie. Right. And anybody who's seen that video knows how horrific that really was. Like, I'm not trying to laugh or make light of it. It's more like an uncomfortable laugh, right? As anybody who's ever been in a fight and has been punched in the face or kicked in the ribs or anything like that can attest, it is not good. So I kind of feel like, he says he wants to meet with Goodell before they discuss the suspension, stuff like that. So I kind of put it in that 4 to 6 range where I feel like it'll end up being like 4-game suspension for all that. And I mean, listen, where he's going in drafts right now, like I'm totally fine with that. I mean, I've seen him fall as like, to like the 7th, 8th, and 9th round in some drafts. So, for me, I'll take a look at it. Absolutely. At that price, because at that, if I'm looking in the 8th or 9th round, that dude's like my RB3 at best, at best.
And it's a high upside play if you're able to kind of wait him out. I know some leagues have like the NA spots where if he gets suspended, maybe you can slot him in there. If you have a way to kind of stash him on a deep bench, like, with the second half of the season could potentially be with a player of Alvin Kamara's caliber, with hopefully an offense that looks more like an NFL offense than he's had to deal with the last few seasons with, Dalton and Taysom Hill and whatever else they had down there at quarterback. Maybe Derek Carr can bring a little semblance of order to that offense this season for him, though.
It's got to be Pete Carmichael, who's like got like, I don't know, I guess Taysom Hill's got nudie pictures of Carmichael or something like that, hanging out in a hot tub with somebody, because like we thought the Taysom Hill nonsense was going to end when like Sean Payton left, and it's persisted. Then Joe Lombardi left, and it still persisted. So Carmichael is the one thing that's kind of moving along with that, which is just so
frustrating, because it has its moments where it works, and then that just continues the reasoning that they're going to keep going to it. If they could just figure out how to shut him down, then we'd never probably have to worry about it. It's like where you really don't see the Wildcat anymore, right? Like once teams figured out how to stop a Wildcat, you don't see the Wildcat run as much, but now they have Taysom Hill running this offense, and until teams can consistently shut it down, seems like he's going to keep being a problem for us in fantasy. I see Britt's comment here. Zeke needs to come back to Dallas, and Jerry's tea leaves. So we'll see. We'll see if fullback Ezekiel Elliott can work his way back into that organization. So all right, Howard, let's jump in here. I appreciate everybody tuning in. If you had any questions, feel free to throw them in chat. Howard and I are more than welcome and happy to answer some RB questions, answer some general fantasy football questions if you got them for us here as well. Taking a look at the first 2 rounds in terms of ADP here, we have Christian McCaffrey, Austin Eckler, Bijan Robinson, guys going in the first round. Second round running backs, Nick Chubb, Saquon Barkley, Jonathan Taylor, Tony Pollard, and Derrick Henry rounding out the 1 through 8 running back ADPs here. How are you approaching your drafts? Are you targeting either of these if you're in a position to draft them? And which of your favorites here of this top 2 round position?
Right there, RBs 3, 4, and 5, baby. That is without a doubt my wheelhouse. I'm buying into the Bijan Robinson thing because I know the scheme that Arthur Smith is going to run. And it's a super easy thing to handcuff Tyler Algier to him later on in your drafts. So you're totally covered. Again, it's buying into the system, not necessarily just the player. Now, Bijan Robinson, incredibly talented guy, not going to take anything away from him, but it's the system that's also helping make the man. So Bijan, I'm 100% in. I'm 100% in on Nick Chubb. I will always love Nick Chubb. He has always been my guy. And now that Saquon Barkley is signed, we know that Giants offense, it has to run through Saquon Barkley, both the passing game and the running game. So those are the 3 guys between the first 2 rounds. If I can come away with 2 of those 3 with my first 2 picks, yeah, I'll be over in the corner over there, like doing some unspeakable things to myself.
Listen, I for that reason exactly is why I tend to like drafting at the end of first rounds this year. Now, Austin Eckler's always in my guy. If I can get him anywhere in the middle rounds, like rubber stamp on my team. I took him first overall last year in drafts, and people thought I was crazy taking him over Taylor and CMC. I took him the year before that as well. When he finished RB2, I mean, he's just in PPR and half PPR leagues, he's such a dynamic force here. And I'm not even really worried about Kellen Moore. I know a lot of people keep talking about how Kellen Moore uses running backs in Dallas, but until they bring in Ezekiel Elliott or somebody that can run in the red zone, I'm not worried about Austin Eckler coming off the field. I don't see Isaiah Spiller being a guy that's taking Austin Eckler off the field. Again, if they bring in somebody that can be a red zone bulldozer like a Fournette or an Elliott, sure, maybe. But until that depth chart changes, there's nobody behind Austin Eckler that I'm worried about Kellen Moore replacing, just because in Dallas he used Elliott over Tony Pollard, 2 elite running backs. Doesn't have that with the Chargers. I don't see that being a problem for Eckler. Raise your hand, Howard. What do we got?
I have to disagree with you. And listen, I think that, it's a great topic of discussion because we do talk a lot about, offensive schemes. And while it's not exactly what we're looking at with what he did in Dallas, it's the type of offense that he runs. And Eckler's primary value is in the passing game, right? I mean, we went through this with Alvin Kamara, right? I mean, 81 receptions, 3 straight years or 4 straight years. It was unbelievable. But, Kellen Moore doesn't we haven't seen huge passes to the running backs. I mean, they have some, but they don't have the volume passing, to really support what Eckler's targets were the last 2 years in Joe Lombardi's system, or what was going on, before that with the Chargers. There was a lot of checkdowns to the running backs. I just don't see them in this scheme doing it as much. I think so far, yes, Eckler is their primary guy. Joshua Kelly, more than Isaiah Spiller, sure, I think is the concern for the between the tackles and the short yardage work. But for me, it's about Eckler and the receptions and targets. And I think that's going to come down to the point where I'm not outright fading him, but he's definitely not my favorite running back.
I mean, for me, I like to believe that coaches aren't stupid, which is generally wrong. Most coaches in the NFL are not very smart. But are you going to a new team looking to make your mark here? and taking what you have as an elite skill set at a position with Austin Eckler and what he brings to that offense, and just be like, we're not really going to utilize that. Like, I find that difficult to trust, because like he's going there looking at his offense and understands how effective he's been in that offense, as productive as he's been with that offense. And I understand that he's bringing his style of play in there, but I don't think you're just going to push him aside and no longer utilize what makes that offense so dynamic in its personnel. So, I would be surprised if all of a sudden now he's looking at Austin Eckler and is like, you're going to be a 70 target, 60 target guy. We'll give you 30 catches. We'll run you a little bit between the 20s and like, we'll move on. So, to me, I would be hurt. I would be hurt financially given the investment I've made at Austin Eckler this year, but I just don't see that being a case. I would hope that wouldn't be the case with Kellen Moore. But a lot of the argument that I've heard, Howard, is people more so likening how he used the Elliott Pollard backfield as a reason to downgrade Austin Eckler. And I'm just like, we've seen Joshua Kelly. We've seen, like, no, they're not the same caliber of players. Zeke Elliott was a leading rusher in the NFL. Pollard was a change of pace guy with speed that's obviously come into his own over the last couple of seasons, but that personnel doesn't exist on the Chargers yet. Now, Britt here, how far would Eckler's value fall if he was traded to Indy for Taylor? Sure. I mean, I wasn't really in on Taylor this year to begin with because of a little bit of the uncertainty there, especially if they went to the running quarterback with Richardson to start, because we see how RPOs can be played. And they don't really check down to the running backs nearly as much, and he's a younger rookie quarterback. So, yeah, that would probably hurt a little bit. But again, you look at that offense, they really don't have, guys behind him. We're looking at Moss, who's hurt now, Deion Jackson. I think they have like an undrafted kid that's making some noise there, or a late round pick that's making a little noise in camp as well, just because Taylor's not getting reps. If Eckler went to that team, he'd still be the clear-cut number one guy. But sure, I don't think that his skill set would fit given the personnel at quarterback. Now, if Gardner Minshew ends up being the guy, then all systems go. I think he'll be checking down Eckler all day. So,
I have a slightly different take here.
Sure.
I mean, first and foremost, to your point about Kellen Moore coming in and tossing aside a valuable asset like Austin Eckler, that's exactly what we saw when the Saints changed their offensive scheme and Joe Lombardi left. I mean, I'm looking at 100 targets, at least 100 targets on average for Alvin Kamara from 2017 through 2020. Last two seasons, 67 targets, 77 targets. Now, granted, he missed a couple of games, but he played 15 last year, 13 the year before. So proportionally, you do see coaches and coordinators come in that they want to put their own stamp in it. Brandon Staley is on the hot seat in Los Angeles, on the hot seat. So going with what's been needs to go away. Like, he needs to inject some new life into this team, and that's why he's got Kellen Moore in there, and they were so happy to go away from Joe Lombardi. Eckler in Indy, I'm actually more bullish on him in Indy than I am with him in Los Angeles, because I do think that he becomes primary back, very featured, a lot of RPO, a lot of outside zone scheme going on for them. It suits Eckler's skill set so much better than Kellen Moore's offensive scheme in Los Angeles. So if, let's say, because I don't remember who popped that possible trade idea into it, right? Like, the Chargers give Eckler and a second round draft choice to Indy for Jonathan Taylor, and I'm like, smash accept on that sucker right there, because it works for both. It works beautifully for both running backs and for both teams. So if that trade were to happen, dude, to the moon for both of them. For me, I would have to bump both of them up my rankings.
So for me, Eckler's obviously like elite fantasy value is tied to his ability to catch passes. You mentioned Alvin Kamara. The last 2 years, when you mentioned he missed games, his per 17 game average is still 90 targets for each. So a little bit less than where he was at, but they also were toying around with Taysom Hill at quarterback. They had Jameis Winston in there for a little bit. So again, quarterback change, different style of play. I agree with you a little bit on that with Kamara, but frustrating the way that they were calling the offense in some instances with him out there. And then his own injury problems were hampering him a bit there. But for me, if just the history of a mobile quarterback not throwing to the running back as much, if you want to increase Eckler's carrying, that could actually be a problem in terms of the wear and tear on him. We haven't really seen him be a guy that's a 250 carry guy, so I worry a little bit there. Touchdowns have obviously boosted Eckler's fantasy value as well. Isn't he going to score as much as the Chargers? Probably not this season. So I'd be less bullish on him. But Taylor, I mean, that would be ridiculous if he went to the Chargers all system go.
I'm like salivating just
in that spot. Don't need to waste too much time. I took Saquon Barkley in the FSGA best ball draft, 9th overall. It's a 14-team best ball draft, so pretty deep rosters on there. This was before Barkley had signed his extension. I was never, or the franchise tag, I was never in the belief that he was going to miss games or hold out, so I felt like I got a pretty good value on him there, and I think you'll see Barkley probably start to move up a little bit more now that he has signed. And you and I have obviously been always big Nick Chubb fans here. I'm not worried about Jerome Ford cutting into Nick Chubb snaps here. And as much as the zero RB truthers out there would like to tout Jerome Ford as the next Kareem Hunt.
Looking at you, Kev Tompkins.
Yeah, I don't believe that to be the case. And a lot of people, they like to use sample sizes to fit their argument. So they're like, well, what about the 4 or 5 games where Deshaun Watson was QB and Nick Chubb struggled? It's like, yeah, well, Deshaun Watson kind of sucked. Right, I'm going to assume that
take the word "kinda" out of there.
Yeah, I'm going to assume if Deshaun Watson is better this year, with like another full season under his belt, getting the rust off, that offense is going to be good. And we saw the numbers that Brissett put up. We saw that Chubb put up with Brissett under quarterback. I have to hope that Deshaun Watson can bring that out of Chubb if he plays better. So that's the guys in rounds 1 and 2 here, Howard. If we're taking a look at the next couple of rounds of plays here, rounds 3 and 4, Josh Jacobs still hanging around RB9, but we see him dropping. Ramondre Stevenson at RB10, Najee Harris, Breece Hall, Travis Etienne, Jahmyr Gibbs, Joe Mixon, Kenneth Walker, again, a guy that's likely dropping down due to the injury, and Aaron Jones rounding out your RB9 through 17. We're not even in the top 20 RBs. We're through 4 rounds. That's, again, kind of just pointing out the change in philosophy here at the position.
Yeah, very, very intriguing there. All right, so from this range here, I think we're both in on Ramondre Stevenson, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm not worried about them working these guys out. I think I have a little bit of a different perspective being a Patriots fan, being around the local media. Anytime Belichick brings in a name running back, everybody starts tweeting, here we go, like so-and-so to the Patriots, where Belichick has said a bunch of times, and it's been reported as so, he likes to work out guys all the time. So when an injury does happen, he has a list of players that fit their scheme, are in shape, understand what they're looking to do, and then they give that guy a call and then bring him in at a later point in the season. So it's not that he's bringing in Dalvin Cook or Leonard Fournette or Ezekiel Elliott to sign them today. It's that if Ramondre Stevenson goes down today at practice, he already knows which of those 3 running backs are in shape, understood their system, and can be brought in at a salary that they probably are willing to pay and sort of fill the gap. That's generally how he handles these workouts. So I'm never, oohing and ahhing when he brings a guy in for a workout here. More likely than not, it's just to get paper on a guy to maybe bring in at some point during the year.
Yeah. So I think we're both of like mind there. So Ramondre Stevenson. I'm starting to soften a little bit on Najee Harris. I know everybody's in on Jaylen Warren late, but I still think that Najee is somebody that we need to take a longer look at. Especially with Pittsburgh trying to, make those improvements on their offensive line. I'm in on Joe Mixon. Dude took a pay cut for this year and next year to stay with the team. He wants to be a part of it. Yes, I guess, Chase Brown, who they brought in, is fine to develop for the future, but I'm perfectly fine here with Joe Mixon. I think those three guys, Stevenson, Harris, Mixon, those are my favorites out of this group here. And Aaron Jones, I kind of bring in as my fourth.
Yeah, I'm definitely in on Ramondre here just because I think he's going to be a volume monster, and I believe in Bill O'Brien flipping this offensive round. I don't mind Najee Harris. Again, I'm a little bit more bullish on the Steelers this year offensively than I think most are. I think Pickett going to give him an opportunity in year 2, second full season as an NFL quarterback. Same offensive system here, a little bit better of an offensive line. That offense can get some things moving on. I think I might be straying from the field a little bit on Jahmyr Gibbs. It seems like Twitter is definitely torn on the guy. For me, it's more so that I think the investment of him in terms of draft capital, and now even more so the draft video that they tweeted out about just like how excited they were to get this guy, that they were actually willing to draft him. What was it at, like 6, but they did the trade back and they were still able to get him at 13. Everybody looks at DeAndre Swift and is like, well, look how they use DeAndre Swift. This is exactly what they're going to use with Jahmyr Gibbs. It's like they're two different players. DeAndre Swift was never healthy. If DeAndre Swift could have shown some durability, I guarantee you he would have been an every down back for that offense with his speed, his ability to be an impact game in the passing game. You know, just like you see Alvin Kamara and guys like that able to play every down. It's just that DeAndre Swift wasn't able to do that. So for my opinion, given the investment they made with Jahmyr Gibbs, and now even more so seeing how in on they were on their like draft process videos on the guy and the impact he can make in that passing game, I think they're going to utilize him more in the early downs than people are giving them credit for. Everybody looks at what Jamal Williams did last year with his leading touchdowns, and they bring in David Montgomery and paid him to sort of take over that role, and that's all fine and dandy. But Jamal Williams only got the carries that he was getting that consistently because DeAndre Swift was hurt all the time. I feel like if DeAndre Swift was healthy, he would have been that main back. You would have seen Williams as a change of pace, a short yardage guy. And sure, if they get another 25 touches inside the 5, maybe you'll see David Montgomery approach double-digit touchdowns. But if DeAndre Swift was healthy, who's to say that we wouldn't see them scoring more from outside the 5, from the 10 maybe, outside the 10, with his big playmaking ability that Jahmyr Gibbs can have. I see Britt's commentaries lining up as wide receiver with Montgomery on the field. That's great. Want to see him more on there. Now, I'm going to pause and take that for that report as it is, because how many times have we seen Travis Etienne is lining up as a wide receiver? Kareem Hunt is lining up as a wide receiver. We see these reports. DeAndre Swift, I think, even lining up as a wide receiver, and then it comes to the actual season, and these guys are never lining up as wide receivers. They're just kind of flashing different sets here. But I think Jahmyr Gibbs is going to surprise a lot of people who are doubting him because they're looking too much at what DeAndre Swift's profile was and excited for what we saw out of Jamal Williams, and now thinking, hey, David Montgomery's the guy. I think Jahmyr Gibbs is the guy. I'm all in on him. I've been drafting him in places, and it feels like I'm going against the grain here a little bit with the majority of at least fantasy football Twitter. And I've not fully planted the flag yet, but we're getting there. We're getting to a point where I'm gonna start touting Jahmyr Gibbs pretty heavily here.
I mean, I'm kind of on the fence still about it. I mean, dude's 5'9", 200 pounds. They're focusing much more on his passing, on his receiving work. And they brought in and paid money to David Montgomery, who is a very versatile back. I mean, David Montgomery very underutilized in the passing game in Chicago. And every time, he would catch a pass and he would, take off with it, everybody's like, oh, look at that. They're getting him finally more involved in the passing game and, whatever. So I like Gibbs from a talent standpoint, and I understand what the Lions are doing, but to turn around here and say, based on what we've seen, how they like to run the offense in Detroit and what Dan Campbell likes to do, I think that, this late 3rd round pick, early 4th round pick is a lot of draft capital to spend on a guy who could conceivably just be used as like just a third down back. Like I think that they'll try to keep him involved as much as possible, because when you bring a guy like in like that, you can put him, line him up wherever you want to line him up.
Sure.
But are you going to actually use him in all of that fashion, or does he also at times become a little bit more of a decoy because you're a little worried about, somebody's always got to like keep an eye and see where's Gibbs, because he could be a little on the sneaky side there and a quick short pass and he could be off to the races. Like there's definitely that skill set. I worry about undersized running backs whose biggest focus from everybody has been the number of passes that he's caught. Like, why am I investing, such, huge draft capital in a player like that?
Well, I mean, if from a fantasy football perspective, there's, the catch is more valuable than the rush, right? In terms of a points, if you're in a half point or full point PPR league. But again, for me, I just believe that he's going to be more involved than people are giving him credit for. I think a lot of the detriment around him is, again, the hype based off of the comparison to what we saw out of Jamal Williams last year and just the injuries that DeAndre Swift. When DeAndre Swift was healthy, he was their leading running back for a lot of those games early on. And he would come back.
You died on this hill last year, dude. You and I fought back and forth about it late in the season.
I know, but that's what would happen. He would come back. He'd be the guy. He would get hurt. He'd get dinged. They'd limit him and then be down, and you see the split carries. But even if this ends up being a split carry workload or a snap share workload, like it still feels like Gibbs has the higher profile because it just seems unlikely they're going to have so many touches inside the 5 again that Montgomery's going to be in there to get all of those touchdowns. Now, I feel like we're going to see more touchdowns outside of that spot where Gibbs is going to be utilized. So that, again, I'm willing to sort of flag plan here. I think Jahmyr Gibbs is going to be a steal where he's going in drafts because people, like you said, they're not sure how to evaluate him. I think you have to kind of pick one side of the fence here. I'm picking on the side they're going to utilize him more. You're looking at the offense and thinking David Montgomery is going to be a guy that's going to be in there more as an early down, short yardage end zone guy, and Gibbs is going to be the scat back. But I just don't think you use a 13th overall, I think it was 13th or 12th overall pick on a guy that you plan on being on the field 30% of the time on third downs. I just can't see that being the case. So that's my opinion there on the third, fourth round guys. I'm in with you there on some of the fades there in that range. Let's move on here into rounds 5 through 9. Just some notable ADPs here, guys in this range: Miles Sanders, J.K. Dobbins, Dameon Pierce, Alexander Madison, Cam Akers, Dalvin Cook, Rachaad White, DeAndre Swift, and James Conner are your RB 18 through 27 going rounds 5 through 9. So obviously, as we get a little bit deeper into drafts, the ADP ranges kind of separate themselves out here a little bit more. But if you're looking to draft, talk to me about some of your favorites here, Howard.
Out of this list here, obviously, Miles Sanders, I'm definitely in on. Just hit up at Coupe Fiasco and ask him about Miles Sanders. We've gone over and over. There's a full, beautiful player profile sitting on fantasyalarm.com that we can retweet to everybody again to make sure that you guys are actually seeing it. I like Akers. I don't love Akers, but I like Akers. Dalvin Cook, I'm fine with him. Go to Miami. If he goes to the Jets, he's obviously devalued because of the presence of Breece Hall. But I think then Dalvin Cook, to me, becomes a great early season acquisition for fantasy. And then you try and dish him off because once Breece Hall is fully back to being Breece Hall, it's a great 1-2 punch towards the tail end of the season. But, again, I think that, it makes it easier there for them. But if he goes to Miami, I'm 100% in on Dalvin Cook. And I love Rachaad White for the volume. And I actually like James Conner for the volume as well. Everybody keeps, dismissing Arizona because they're a crap team and we don't know what's going on with Kyler Murray. They are a bad team, but Conner he's involved in the passing game there as well. And they don't have any featured backs behind him that really kind of concern me. He's not a target of mine, but if I'm looking and I need a running back, I'm not going to overlook Conner.
Yeah, he feels like a safe floor guy. That's kind of where I am with Conner as well. A guy that I'm not avoiding, but if I'm sitting there and I'm like, I kind of need like an RB4 RB5. Like I'm happy to draft Connor there. I think he can, make some interesting moves. I got to ask you though. Now Andrew Cooper obviously does his wide receiver article comparing it to Vegas totals. Some of the running back rushing totals, I think to me are a little bit surprising. Cam Akers is at I think it was like 700 or 750 yards rushing. You talk about an offense that, again, doesn't really have a running back behind Akers. We've seen him finish strong last year. We saw him obviously as a rookie breakout. He got a little bit of a weird first half of last year. Does that worry you at all when you're looking to target a guy? If you go to look at their Vegas rushing odds, and you said you like Rachaad White, they have him at 700 rushing yards as an over-under there. How much do you put into what Vegas is putting their rushing totals compared to guys you're looking to draft?
I put some into it because I do think that a lot of the Vegas algorithms, and the handicapping doesn't take everything into consideration. I think they do put a lot of weight on past performance. And, again, it's a totally different scheme that you're looking at, like Rachaad White. I'm not saying that Rachaad White's going to be 1,000-yard rusher, but they're going to give him the volume. Now, as the phrase goes, the phrase that pays is that running the football is a luxury of winning teams. Tampa Bay, we don't see them being a winning team. Right. So, for that, the Rams are not viewed as a winning team. So, the expectation, I think, from Vegas is that these guys will run the football hard in the first half, but as soon as their teams fall out of it, then what kind of carries are they going to get in the second half of the season? But, I kind of look towards, what happened with Dameon Pierce last year. Houston was terrible, but Lovie Smith was like, I don't care. I'm running that football no matter what. And we saw, like, how many times did we see Dameon Pierce like break some like big crazy run in the second half where you're like, oh my God, I expected this dude to be game flowed out. And meanwhile, he just popped for somebody in a GPP because he rushed for an 85-yard touchdown, so right. I look at guys like White and Akers as bell cows for their offensive scheme. I'm not worried too much that Vegas is kind of lowballing it here because, let's face it, when you're dealing with over-unders in football, right, you tend to want to lean on the under anyway because, it's 17 weeks or 17 games. It's, injuries crop up on players all the time. There's all sorts of, circumstances that kind of tell you that you have to really err on the side of caution and go with the under. There are some that I like that I'll be like, oh, they're too low on that. But, when you're talking about a guy like White, you're talking about a guy like Akers in fantasy, I'm in. But betting their over under on their rushing yard props, I'm not even going to touch.
Yeah, I'm with you there. A guy that I have been in on here, we'll look at the second group here from rounds 5 through 9, Javonte Williams. I am high on Javonte Williams. Anyways, love that he was able to avoid, the pup list, that he's been out there. Looks like he could be ready to go. He was, again, somebody that I took in that best ball draft. Is a 14-team league. I think I got him in rounds 4 or 5, and that was well above ADP at the time for him. But if he's a full system go, I'm okay if he's slow to start. But if 3-4 games into the season, they're like, all right, he's healthy 70% of the snaps, go in that offense with Sean Payton in that Broncos system. I think he is an absolute bargain where he's going right now. If he did not have that knee injury, he would be a second-round pick this year, right? Like if he lived up to expectation and the type of player that he can be, he'd be in that second-round, third-round mix. Instead, he's going, ADP 73, RB 27. I've been grabbing a lot of shares of Javonte Williams, and his ADP is only going up. So people are starting to take him more. The value is still there, though.
I've got some shares of him. Listen, I was all in on him last year. I had him everywhere last season. He was my guy. I was like, I love the scheme that they want to run here. I know that of what his skill set is, that he can catch passes out in the flat as well. Early on best balls, things like that. Listen, The knee injury was devastating because it wasn't just like, oh, I tore my ACL.
Right.
It was like my ACL, my MCL, my PCL. So I mean, everything was just shredded there, and it was they really didn't sound confident in his progress throughout the offseason. But now, not going on PUP, now that he's sitting in practices still, and here we are, August 2nd, and he's being featured. I'm getting more and more trusting of him. I'll still handcuff to Samaje Perine, and I do think that Perine will have some standalone value still, whether Javante's there in week 1 or not. I think Perine will still have that value. But yeah, man, I mean, listen, if you're gonna let him fall like that, I'm fine with that. I'm totally fine with that.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of where I'm at, right? If they think he's ready to go, who am I to argue against it? If he's out there, he's practicing, he's gonna be ready for week 1. I'm gonna believe in the talent and the guy. I think that knee is good, ready to be there. Other guys in this range, I was targeting James Cook before the Nyheim Hines injury. Now, I don't think the Nyheim Hines injury really impacts James Cook all that much, anyways. But you look at what they brought in here after Devin Singletary left. They traded Zach Moss last year. They have Damian Harris on a 1-year deal. They have Latavius Murray on a 1-year deal. Neither is really for much money. They used the early round draft capital on James Cook. And to me, he profiles as a guy that can be explosive in this offense playing next to Josh Allen, can be the home run hitter running the football. If they want to check down to him, he can get that done too. We saw Devin Singletary last year among the leaders in routes run as a running back here. So I was already very high on James Cook. I think the Nyheim Hines injury maybe put his name a little bit more on radars, even though that injury to me didn't necessarily need to do that. But he's a guy that I've been drafting as well. What are your thoughts on James Cook this year?
I like James Cook a lot, and I've got him in a couple of spots because Ken Dorsey, when he took over as the coordinator when Daboll left, was very much adamant about the fact that he preferred a little bit more of a balanced offense. You also want to be protective of Josh Allen. You don't want him running the football as much as he is, because you see Josh Allen, right? And he's like running the football. The Bills are up by 3 scores,
right,
and he's like gutting it out for to get that extra yard, to get that first down. And he's like putting himself at risk. And they do want to kind of hedge back on that. If you look at the offseason moves that they did, rebuilding that offensive line was a priority for theirs in free agency. And then they drafted Osiris Torrance in the 2nd round. And he's a huge, awesome run blocker. So I think Buffalo is starting to try and make that move there. And I think getting rid of Singletary and bringing in Harris was actually a huge plus for Cook, because Harris is less of a versatile back than Cook is. Cook and Singletary, you're kind of dealing with like the same guy almost. But, Harris is just, between the tackles, short yardage. You want him to pound the rock like that. It leaves so much more open for Jared Cook. So much more room for activities, John.
Yeah, again, I had a pretty good fantasy football season last year. One of the reasons was actually Devin Singletary. I mean, I did not project him to be as involved in a passing game as he was, which is huge. But the way he finished that year, the year prior for Buffalo, where they had that game against Tampa Bay where they didn't run a single time, right? And then all of a sudden, in like the first half or whatever it was, and then all of a sudden they started leaning on the running back a little bit more, and down the stretch, and we saw Singletary, be a league winner for guys that had him on their roster down that fantasy football playoffs. I was kind of drafting him, building off of that performance, thinking they saw they needed to be a little bit more of a balanced offense. They saw the versatility that Singletary can bring to that team. He had a great year. Then they drafted James Cook. And then we saw at times where Cook would play over Singletary for stretches of games, and he looked good when doing it. He had a pretty good game against the Patriots. And now I kind of look at him almost at the exact same ADP that Singletary was being taken last year. And I'm like, guys, we just saw this. We saw the player that they wanted to use him like. So yeah, I'm just buying a lot of James Cook shares here. Quickly, thoughts on the Washington running back situation? Antonio Gibson, Brian Robinson going right after each other, RB33, RB34.
Dude, every time I do a show with Britt Flynn, she like hands me a pitcher of Kool-Aid that's labeled Antonio Gibson, and I'm coming around on it more and more. I mean, listen, Eric Bieniemy, what does he do in this system? He's copying what they're doing over for the for the Chiefs. He's copying their ooh, look at that. Oh, you guys can't see me right now, but I just got me a nice little smoothie here in the middle of the show.
We'll throw it on there, Howard. What kind of smoothie are we drinking?
What kind of smoothie am I drinking? I have no idea, but it comes in this beautiful Fantasy Alarm pint glass.
Love that.
And who doesn't love that at all? Anywho, shout out to my darling wife for being such an amazing woman.
Everybody needs a nice, cool refreshment, right? Out there in the shed, Howard.
I'm like working hard hours and stuff like that. Yeah. So, where were we?
Antonio Gibson.
Oh, Antonio Gibson. So I'm buying in on him more and more because that's the offense that Eric Bieniemy has been running. And we know Andy Reid's system, they love pass catching running backs. They just wish that they were able to do it more with like a bell cow back and not have to constantly like bring in Jerick McKinnon. So I think right now we could see a little bit of an edge here for Antonio Gibson. Now, Jim Bowden and I, we battle back and forth. He is 100% in on Brian Robinson, and I'm like 80% in Antonio Gibson. But, I like Robinson. I don't love Robinson. So I'm kind of leaning in that direction for right now. So, yeah, I would say PPR leagues, Gibson, half-point PPR or standard for the four of you who play standard still. I would kind of lean Robinson.
Yeah. You know what you want to do? You want to play Robinson in week 1 when they're home against the Cardinals, and then don't ever play him again. You said running is the luxury. Running is the luxury of the winning team. Well, I don't know if you've seen the schedule here for the Washington Commanders this year.
Crazy, right?
But they are in trouble early. After the home game against the Cardinals, they have at Denver, home against Buffalo, at Philly, home against the Bears, at the Falcons, at the Giants, home against the Eagles, Patriots, Seahawks, Giants, like AFC East, NFC East, tough as they come in terms of scheduling. And then they have, the NFC West on their schedule here as well. 49ers, Rams, Seahawks. I don't know how many games the Washington Commanders are winning this season, so I don't know where Brian Robinson is supposed to be scoring all these fantasy points when he averaged less than 4 yards a carry last year. I think Gibson's going to be on the field a lot because they're just playing down, which is kind of why I'm like semi-bullish on Sam Howell a little bit, because if we are to believe his rushing potential, I know Andrew Cooper does not believe in his rushing upside, but if they have to throw a lot because they're trailing, that just means more potential for him to scramble and use his legs a little bit more. So if you're in a super flex league or 2 QB league, like I'm okay going Sam Howell because I don't think they're going to be winning or up in many games this year. That schedule is brutal here. Couple more minutes, so let's just go final notable RBs. I got Jerick McKinnon on the picture here. You mentioned Eric Bieniemy no longer there. Does this change at all then a strategy for the Chiefs?
No, not at all. I mean, it's Matt Nagy, right? So right. He was the coordinator before Bieniemy. And then he tried to, do his thing in Chicago and failed miserably. This is always Andy Reid's offense. Always Andy Reid's offense. So I'm fine with McKinnon. On this list here, right there, 42, 45, 49, baby. I love that range. McKinnon, Bigsby, who I think is going to get some good short yardage between the tackles work in Jacksonville, and Singletary, who I think, Coop and I have talked about this a bunch. The pass catching running back. So when Houston's trying to play catch up in the second half, who's going to be on the field? It's going to end up being, probably a little bit more Devin Singletary. So Those 3 guys are the ones who I like the most right now.
Yeah. I've been grabbing a lot of Jerick McKinnon just because of his usage in that offense last season and how dynamic of a player I think he's always been capable of. It's been injuries that really held him down for a lot of his early career, but now they got him in a great spot where they don't have to burn him out too much and use him as a change of pace guy and someone that Mahomes can just do magic with. Another guy on this list that I've been taking a lot of is Zamir White before the Josh Jacobs news even came out. I thought that there was a lot of signs that this could be a year where Josh Jacobs' season may end the way Derek Carr's season ended. The Las Vegas Raiders are not expected to win a lot of games. Josh Jacobs, I don't think, likes being in Las Vegas. I don't think many players like playing for Josh McDaniels. I think he might be done after this year, the way he's just gone to organizations and just tanked them fairly quickly. So, I mean, to me, Zamir White's a guy that could see early down work. He's got a guy that is capable in the passing game a little bit as well if they want to throw to him. And if Jacobs holds out, or is a guy that's like, oh, my groin, oh, my quad, oh, my calf, and is constantly dinged up because he just doesn't want to be there in Las Vegas, then Zamir White's a free square late round pick. Coop does a lot of these articles, lottery tickets versus scratch tickets, right? And Zamir White's a guy that could be maybe a little bit of both. If in week one, Zamir White doesn't see the field, then you can let him go to your waiver wire, pick somebody else up. But if in week one, Zamir White's got 40% of the snap share, well, now you got yourself a lottery ticket there with your last pick and a guy that could easily take over the lead role if Jacobs just decides to cash it in this year and go hit free agency next year for a bigger deal. So I'm interested there for Zamir White. I like Malik Davis as a late round throw and McKinnon there as well.
Well, all righty.
That's where I'm at. That's where I like those of you who are listening on the podcast here. We got Cleo Herbert, Zach Charbonnet, Jarek McKinnon, Tank Bigsby, Devin Singletary, Ezekiel Elliott, Zamir White, and Malik Davis here as some late round dart throws at the running back position. Howard, it's been a great time here doing the Quick Out Fantasy Show with you. Any final words for people at home?
No, hit that QR code right there. Get the Fantasy Alarm Draft Guide. Get the cheat sheet. Subscribe to the All Pro subscription. We ain't going to let you down. We got way too much firepower here at Fantasy Alarm. Way too much.
Amen to that. All right, guys, we'll be back next week. Catch y'all later.